So, as I said, this XJR1300, it's actually a 1251cc engine, which is air and oil cooled. So you have the classic retro styled fins on the cylinders there, and they're the oil cooler at the front. Now the power on this is 106 brake horsepower at 8,000 RPM and a torque of 98 Newton meters at 6,500 RPM. It's a 5-speed gearbox, and I would have to observe at this point that I always feel once you're up there that there's room for a 6th gear on this bike, but nonetheless very, very capable and a sound and solid gearbox. Chain driven. Suspension at the front, standard forks, and at the rear you can see the swing arm with the twin Öhlins shock absorbers. So very, very competent in terms of its handling and suspension. I would observe that there's a slight weave on bends, and you do need to use your body weight, which in my case is about 13.5 stones, to persuade her to go around some of the tighter bends. But otherwise, you know, the handling's absolutely spot on with this. Weight of this bike dry is 222 kilos and wet 240 kilos, and it has a 21 litre tank, which pretty much is good for 150 miles, no more if you're actually enjoying yourself, and a top speed, would you believe, of 160.2 miles per hour. I'd be lucky to get halfway to that, I think, but some of the speed characteristics, I think, from the Yamaha R1. The only extras I've put on this machine basically is the chrome rack at the back instead of the standard black arm. And that's about it basically. As I say, no bells and whistles to speak of, just a good, honest, solid 1300 retro muscle bike. I mean, the competition for these, probably the Suzuki GSX 1400, Kawasaki have one, perhaps Honda CBR 1300 or CB 1300, but I have to say, and I am biased, that I think this one is the best looking, and certainly in terms of paying an homage to the styling of 1960s and 70s motorcycles. I think design wise this one is absolutely spot on. So let's take it for a ride. Okay, so here we are on the classic, some might say iconic, Yamaha XJR 1300, and I've had this bike now for just over a year, and never fails to put a smile on my face, that's for sure. I don't know if you can pick up on the GoPro, this one's got 8,500 miles on the clock. It's a 2008 model. It's in absolutely superb condition, and it's a real pleasure to ride. And those of you that have more than one motorcycle, I'm sure, are acutely aware that if you ride one bike one day and then a different bike the following day, you do need to mentally adjust. I mean, yesterday I was riding my Rocket 3 Touring, which is a completely different beast to this. So I'm just having now sort of 3 or 4 miles into this particular trip to Squires Café to mentally adjust to the different riding technique, because this bike is physically smaller. The engine's 1000cc smaller as well, but believe me, there's no shortage of power in this machine whatsoever. The temptation with something like this is to adopt a very, very lazy riding style, and that's because you can effectively pop her in 5th gear and just control your forward momentum with the throttle anywhere between sort of 20 miles an hour and God forbid, and I'm sure nobody would, but it's claimed top speed of 160 miles an hour. So you could in theory do that. I don't recommend that, but it gives you an idea of the levels of torque and the power in this best part of 1300cc inline air and oil cooled 4-cylinder engine. And she handles really well. There's a bit of a weave on bends, but it's not that disturbing. And because of the actual physical weight and in terms to a certain degree of where the centre of gravity sits on the bike, you do have to make a conscious effort when it comes to coaxing her around some of the tighter bends at speed. Now we're just going to have a ride out to Squires Café, which is one of the biggest and probably best known bikers cafes in the north of England, in Sherburn in Helmet, just north of Leeds. And we're going to go via Otley, so we're just coming into Otley via the back way now from Menston, and from there we're going to go on to Poole, Arvington, Harewood, Collingham, Boston Spa, Tadcaster, and through to Squires at Sherburn. It's a lovely route with some cracking roads. Now, those of you that watched my earlier video of Otley to Pateley Bridge on the BMW R1200 GS, I don't know if you picked up on the audio. I suspect that you wouldn't have done on the GoPro system. You just have heard me droning on. But speaking of droning, there was a droning coming from the back wheel, which was quite noticeable at the end of that journey. And a couple of days after that, I took the old GS out for another ride, and the back end began to feel very unstable. So I checked the tyre pressures. I mean, one of the beauties of the GS is the telemetry means that you can actually check the tyre pressures on the move via the instrument display. And they were not quite what they should have been, but certainly not to the extent that would have explained that degree of instability that I was experiencing. So when I got back home, put the bike on the centre stand and gave the old back wheel a to and fro, top to bottom, and there was a good felt like half an inch of play. So clearly the wheel bearing had gone. So I took the bike sort of 4 or 5 miles down the road to my independent mechanic, Steve Dale. Absolutely first class, meticulous independent motorcycle mechanic. And somebody once says, if you find a good indie mechanic, hold on to him or her for dear life, and that's what I've certainly done with Steve. He's brilliant. But anyway, I just got the bike there because as I pulled through into his workshop, we noticed that the rear wheel was covered in oil and all the brake pads were contaminated and what have you, and the bearing had actually collapsed and the seals had gone. I mean, to be fair, the bike's got 23,000 miles on the clock, so it's not unreasonable to expect a consumable part like a wheel bearing to fall due for replacement, but that could have been extremely dramatic. And as a consequence, it's a bit of a thing with motorcycles really, that you tend to find that when one issue presents itself, then several others tend to present themselves at the same time, and I think that's probably because actually your awareness around some of the mechanical issues on the bike is probably heightened. And so I immediately realised I needed a new rear tyre on that one, and rear brake pads, and Steve's going to wire up the new LED spotlights that I have on there. So that's going to be a week or two that he has that, because he's in very high demand, which tells you all that you need to know. So that's part of the reason why I'm playing out on this today, but it does give me the opportunity to sort of go through why I always find it a very rewarding riding experience on this machine, which is physically the smallest bike that I've got, but in terms of engine size it sits right in the middle of the BMW, which is 1200 box twin, and the Triumph Rocket, which is the 2.3 litre 3-cylinder. So this one sits you know, in between the two, but in terms of its physical size, it's a good bit smaller and a lot more convenient under certain circumstances to be able to manoeuvre about. So we're just coming into the little village, small town of Boston Spa in West Yorkshire, not far from Wetherby. We have some flashing lights ahead of us, so I'll slow down a bit. That's definitely my former outfit there on the left. What has befallen who? Speeding would be my guess, but you never know. So yeah, just approaching the lovely little spot, Boston Spa. Some very expensive properties around here. And after here there's a great road on the way into Tadcaster, and then through two small villages called Towton and Barkstonash. Towton, famous battlefield site, huge battle there, part of the War of the Roses, Richard of York and all that. For those of you with a historical bent, I'm not particularly one of those people. Just like to mention at this point, this kit I'm wearing here, I'm really impressed with. I mean, I do have full leathers, and I do have the BMW textiles as well, but I think befitting for this bike, I'd wear this. It's called Heritage Gear, and it gives me a chance really to recommend motorcycle accessories and clothing retailer just outside of Bradford on Frizingall Road called Nicholas Noble, and I can highly recommend them. It's like an Aladdin's cave in there, absolutely packed with clothing and accessories, and the staff are excellent, helpful, polite, friendly. I can't recommend it highly enough for those of you that are, you know, sort of in the West Yorkshire area. Well, I don't know what you want me to do here. I can't, it's a bike. Can't reverse a bike, my love. You can't reverse a bike. Unbelievable. So, I don't know whether I should edit that out or not. Anyway, that's a hill, and those of you that ride motorcycles will know that you can't push a heavy bike uphill backwards. A fact which seems to have been lost on that lady. But anyway, St Nicholas Noble. Great place to go if you're local to West Yorkshire. I mean, they do supply online, but go there. And they've got a lot of this Merlin heritage gear that I'm wearing. It's like wax cotton. But I've taken the lining out today because it really is warm. For a couple of £100, bearing in mind you can pay, you know, 400 or 500, can't you, for a good motorcycle jacket. It's great. The great value for money. I mean, it's got CE armour, shoulders, elbows, and at the back wax cotton. Very cool. It's got venting, but the lining's very warm, so year round, you know, for a couple of £100. I think it's a great bit of kit. So just a shout out really to the guys at Nicholas Noble at Frizinghall Road in Bradford. This is a great road, all the way into Tadcaster. That's the thing with these naked bikes are, once you sort of start getting up to 60s, 70s plus, your efforts concentrated on stopping on the thing. Because the 30 start the rest of this hill, and as I said before, I do believe it's important for all road route users, but you know, specifically I think for motorcyclists, 30, 40s, 50s, they should be observed. I mean, it is, you know, it is about preserving life when all's said and done. The riders and other road users. On the 60s, well, you pay your money and you take your chance, you know, on the open road. How many people, including serving police officers, I've no doubt, could put their hand on their heart, look you in the eye and tell you that they've never indulged on de-restricted roads when circumstances present themselves. So this is Tadcaster. I'm just checking in the mirror there to make sure I'm still recording. Red light's flashing, so... Lovely little town this. You may remember, I think it was a couple of Christmases ago, was it? When the bridge was washed away in those floods. Might have been more than a couple of years ago now. Memory's deserting me on that one, but it was Tadcaster. It was national news because the bridge effectively links the two sides of the town. And if memory serves, there were a lot of shenanigans in and around the owner of Sam Smith's Brewery. And there's a Sam Smith's pub, and there's John Smith's Brewery. I think Sam Smith's is it behind it, or is it the one we've just come past? I don't know. But anyway, it was an issue because it was reported that he objected to the proposed rebuilding of the bridge, wanted to influence it, and also objected to the provision of a temporary structure to allow people to walk from one side of the town to the other, across the river. And so heaven knows what all that's about, quite what the owner of a brewery should think he has any leverage on issues of local infrastructure. I don't know what was going on there. Hubris, egocentric, grandstanding, who knows.